Hi everyone, my name's Paige and I've chosen the topic of student-centered strategies for inclusive literacy learning. The focus this week was on how teachers, technology and the four resources model can benefit and support students with a disability or learning difficulty. Now the main ideas that I got from the reading were the four resources, which are skills that literacy learners have or aim to have, are being a code breaker, text participant, text user and text analysis. The levels of learning, that is, learning stages that all students progress through, and if they do not achieve a level, this impedes on them in successfully reaching the next. The correlation between learning difficulties and disruption, and assumptions and outdated beliefs around children with disabilities or learning difficulties in a mainstream classroom. Technology and how it evolves, how this affects students and their learning, and the positive outcomes on students with learning difficulties or disabilities. The ways in which teachers can assist students in their literacy learning journey, and how using these strategies benefits the students. Now have a think about the main points that you got. From the reading. Are any the same as mine? What else did you have that I didn't? And also, what points do you think are most important to remember going into future classrooms? I will ask you this again at the end of the video. Moving back to the ideas in the reading and to our first point, the levels of learning. The levels of learning can be transferred to the four resources model, with code breaking being the first, followed by text user, text participant, and text analysis. This idea is consistent with the four resources and each level needing to be completed or accomplished by the student in order to move on to the next. This belief can be counterproductive for students with learning difficulties or students at a young age, as this is not the only entry into literacy. Many children begin with speaking and listening, such as retelling a story orally, and so this hierarchy of learning is proven false, as children can bypass levels and still be literally competent. This can be evident in many classrooms, with the struggling student at a very basic level of literacy, even though they can read or decipher other types of text using other skills, or can analyze a text before being able to read it or understand it. The next point is how learning difficulties and disruption is seen as correlated. Majority of children with a learning difficulty can be seen as disruptive due to their learning needs. This can majorly impact relationships in the classroom, how the rest of the class views that child, and most importantly, affect how that child learns and develops. If they are seen as a nuisance and in the way, they are not going to receive the support they need in the areas they need it to learn and progress in their literacy. In fact, this is due to students' frustration and low self-esteem, as they try to gain attention when they cannot do something, or disregarding the learning as they cannot succeed. I have seen this quite a lot on many of my placements, with students being sent away or ignored because they are not interested in learning or can't do it just because he doesn't want to. These types of suggestions and views from qualified experienced educators is quite daunting, as these children are not getting the support they need and are simply flying under the radar and not learning in the way that they need. Some students are simply seen as struggling with school or having a learning difficulty simply if they are not competent in an area of literacy and can be labelled quickly and indefinitely. This has drastic short and long-term effects on the student's ability to learn and succeed, as well as on their self-esteem to persist and strive to get better or take on challenging tasks, when in reality they may just need another type of activity or way of learning, such as oral learning rather than written or group work rather than individual. The next point I will cover is how technology is used in the classroom for students with learning needs or disabilities and the impact it can have on the child's learning and progression. The definition of literacy is constantly changing with the times of technology, as are many things. We need to be able to include digital technologies as a way of literacy learning, as this is how many students are now able to learn and succeed. Text is not simply just seen on paper, it is heard through an iPad, seen as a pop-up in a video story, or linked to a new web page from a website. The reason the definition of literacy has changed and continues to change. The use of technology in literacy learning can be very beneficial to those who are struggling to develop certain skills and those who are falling behind due to learning difficulties. Through the use of technology, the child with a disability or learning difficulty can suddenly become the competent student when given the right context, tools, and support. It all depends on what that child requires to learn and is given the opportunity to use. When students use technology, they can create texts in informal situations and contexts. These can sometimes be missed by the teacher, leading to the teacher holding beliefs that a certain student is struggling because they cannot complete a worksheet, when they have been using Lego to spell words during free time. Teachers need to be aware that literacy learning can occur in all situations and contexts. My next point discusses what teachers can do to support their students, whether through the use of technology or simply using a new strategy of engaging and supporting students who need it, or focusing on one of the 4 resources that the child is more confident in. When in the classroom, see the situation through the child's eyes. That is, reflect on what it is the student is struggling with and attempt to alter classroom routines, the environment, or the language used to reach a wider range of students. Look at what text participant and text user involve and be a text analyzer towards events. Use an integrated approach, that is, delving into each of the 4 resources to make progress. They may be excelling in a section which can help them develop another. It also helps the student realize how they are all connected. Provide real and available experiences to develop in each of the 4 resources from a variety of texts involving ICT, topics, and times in the day, such as playtime. And scaffold when necessary rather than limiting literacy options available to comprehend or develop something. Make sure the literacy being used is appropriate for the task. An example is to allow a student audio when reading an article if they are more confident in listening, but scaffold learning when writing a job application which needs full sentences. My final point in this video is how all these tools and strategies supports and benefits the students and what teachers should try to avoid. Using technologies more accurately reflects today's world and what they will need to learn in their future, while benefiting them in a way that suits their learning needs. If they prefer audio, allow this option, but when this is not an option, scaffold the task to allow them to learn. Students who struggle in one area should not always be forced to use this to develop the others. Using the strongest resource the student has from the 4 resources model can develop their other areas, such as focusing on political cartoons and their effects when the student has a sense of humour. Focus on what they are able to do and use, rather than what they struggle with. This clears away any expectations or social rules that are put in place and allows the student with a disability or learning difficulty to learn in a way that benefits them. And finally, developing student-centered strategies puts the child at the center of their learning, in which they are able to develop in areas that they are struggling with and use their current abilities and strengths to succeed. So, after listening to my points, what are your thoughts? What is most important to take away from this next time you're in the classroom? And have these points changed since the beginning of this video? Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video and take something away from this to use in your future teaching career.